Well, hello. My name is Jamie Deason. I'm 55 years old, and I live in El Dorado, Arkansas, where I was born and raised. I travel the country going to gun shows, looking for old antique guns and swords. My interest in these weapons started when I was around 5 or 6 years old, looking in old encyclopedias and art books that belonged to my aunt, suits of armor, swords, and battle scenes. And I really liked them back then. I kind of got into cars for a few years, building and racing cars. And around 24, 25, I got into dealing in modern guns, and then I started getting into the antiques. I read and studied up on all your old percussion Colts, Dragoons, Colt Walkers. Studied them for quite a few years, collected those, sold off most of them, and studied Confederate swords. That's one of my specialties, Confederate edged weapons, pistols, long arms, along with the other, Civil War weaponry. And I've collected and dealt in arms and such from the Revolutionary War all the way up in the Korean War. I really like identified items. That's one of my favorite things, is go out and chase down a good piece out of a family, something that's inscribed. That always adds a lot of interest and a lot of value to a piece, to have somebody's name on it, especially if they had some good battle history and, a lot of interesting places they fought in. And the most disappointing thing is to ever have to sell a good piece like that. And as far as funny stories, there was this tall, tongue-tied Texan from Longview, Texas, named Bullwinkle, and he was always wanting to beat somebody out of $1 or $2. He'd patch up an old Colt single action or a 45 automatic, and then he'd brag about how bad he beat somebody on it. And he said nobody could get to him. Well, I had the bright idea at a little gun show in Jackson, Mississippi. I had one of those stretchy cords with a nylon ball you used to tie down tarpaulins. I got under his old Suburban and put that on the drive shaft where it would stretch out and beat on his heat shield. And he left the show that evening, and I guess it got to making some racket. And next morning he was at our hotel door beating on it. And Jamie said, my transmission man put a 94 overdrive on an 84 transmission and worked good, but now it's making some racket. What could that be? And I said, man, I don't know. Well, we got over to the fairground. Well, there he was, driving back and forth across there, rolled his window down. Jamie, come go for a ride in there and tell me what's wrong with this thing. So I got in there with him, and he'd get up to about 30 miles an hour, and it went to banging just like a rod knocking in the motor. And he threw it up neutral and revved the motor up. And ain't the motor. It ain't making any racket when you rev the motor up. That's in the transmission. And I was having to bite my lip, keep from laughing, and he'd keep making that noise. It got down to about 20 miles an hour, so it worked out real well. So we got back in the gun show, and he's talking to a buddy of mine, and the buddy said, now Jamie could fix that. He just don't want to get his hands dirty. So he come over and begged me, man, you got to fix that. I'm a long way from home. So I said, well, I'll see what I can do. So I went out there and took it off, come back in, act like I was washing my hands, and what was wrong with it? I said, well, your governor was broke spring. I said, I fixed that. I think you can make it home with it. And I said, give me $50. He said, hold on a minute. So he went outside and drove it, and he come back, well, you got it going. He said, write me up an invoice for $150. I'm going to fix my transmission, man. Well, there he was, fixed to scam somebody else. So I wrote him up an invoice, and a little while later, I slipped back out there and put it back on. Well, we left that evening heading back to Arkansas, and told a buddy of mine, I said, now don't let him get out on the highway ahead of me. We all had CBs back then, and you could hear him back there. Jamie, Jamie! You could hear it knocking over the CB. Jamie! I wouldn't answer. Jamie! Jamie, this thing's knocking like hell back here. I finally went on. I said, Roy, how's it doing? He said, oh, it was knocking real bad, but it's quit now. And I said, well, it had to adjust itself out. I said, it'd probably be okay. And we stopped over in Tallulah, Louisiana to have a bite to eat. And I said, well, let me check, see if it's got any oil leaks. I got under there and looked, make sure there wasn't any trace of it. And I didn't see anything left. And, of course, we drug it on so long, I was afraid he'd about be a little hot. So we decided to wait to give him his money back. So next time we saw him down in Houston, he'd already been to his transmission repairman, and that guy got under there and found that little ball up under the heat shield where he cut it off. So he knew he'd been had. So I gave him his money back. And of course, he went shows a few years after that, but he's kind of quit. But anyway, my expertise lies in Japanese swords from the 1200s to the World War II, Confederate edged weapons, rifles, pistols, and then I just have a general knowledge of, single action Colts, Winchesters, all the other weapons, military, some foreign weapons, mostly, weapons that was imported that we used in the United States in all of our different wars. I've also indulged in stoneware and antique furniture and images, and I just like a lot of old stuff, and that's what I usually try to study, the more expensive items, but I run across a lot and study up on all of it. So if you can use me, I'd appreciate it, and got any other questions, don't hesitate to give me a call. Thank you very much.